Hi everyone, welcome to the March Future Work Scotland event. Great to have you here. If this is your first time, very warm welcome to you. I see a few familiar faces, so welcome back folks. I'm your host, Sathpal Singh. I'm joined by the Future Work organising team, Donald and Paula. We're all delighted you've joined us for this session. Just the usual formalities. We have very simple code of conduct. We just ask that you're respectful to one another. We want everyone to have a great experience. So yeah, be nice to one another. And we'll take questions at the end. We usually have time at the end. It's an hour and a half the session, so we'll be building time for Q&A. But we might take some questions along the way. So if you do have any questions, pop them into the chat, prefix them with a Q, and that way the team and I can spot them and pick them out and relay them back to James whenever there's opportunity. And we usually do some shout outs at the end, so we'll let you know what else we've got coming up in the remainder of the programme. We've got events in the calendar right up until the summer, so we'll give you a little bit of an insight into what's coming up. And with that, I am delighted to welcome James Sale to Future Work Scotland. We've had a few conversations. It's been really good to get to know James. James is here, as you all know, because he is the creator of Motivational Maps. Amongst other things, he's a writer, he's a speaker, multi-talented guy. He's been doing this for quite a long time, and he's really passionate about helping businesses, find their motivations, creating motivated businesses, creating motivated individuals. Donald and I have both worked through the tools and seen our own individual profiles, which we're going to let James talk through this evening. And he's got 40 years of experience in publications and various other things. So we're absolutely delighted to have him here this evening. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to James so we can learn more. Over to yourself.
Thank you very much, Sathpal. And can I say thank you, everyone, for attending this. It's a pleasure. It's a privilege for me to be asked to come and address this group of people, because I know you're extremely hardworking and talented in what you do. And this is a very self-help kind of group. So there's a kind of energy to it. So I don't want to waste your time. I'm going to speak about motivation to you, and I'm going to share some ideas about motivation, which I think you're going to find very helpful, both for your work, especially your work, but also for your life, because actually motivation doesn't stop in the workplace. It's something which in fact informs all of our life, and the lack of motivation leads us prone to all sorts of subsequent problems. In other words, if we don't have motivation, in fact, we tend to find ourselves less resilient to illness. We become less immune to all the stresses and strains that life throws at us. But more of that anon. Before I get to that point of talking about it, specifically, let me just share with you just a very, very brief background about Motivational Maps and myself. So in essence, it comes down to this company was co-founded with my wife in 2006. I am the actual creator of the product Motivational Maps, and currently we have over 1,400 licensees of the product in various degrees of licensing. It's not a franchise, it's a license in 16 countries. And the map questionnaire itself is in 12 different languages. And in China, in Mandarin, we have the whole product completely translated into Mandarin Chinese. So we're kind of like a very small mom and pop business on the one hand, but on the other, we're quite ambitious. And we, because it's a license, not a franchise, we have and we give our licensees quite a lot of freedom, not to kind of enforce a kind of structure on them, but to allow them to use this product in terms of what we call mapping the wrapping. So if you like to think about it, or we think of the product as like a V8 engine, here's this very powerful engine, but you as a coach, you as a consultant, you as a trainer may have all sorts of things that you regard as primary, and this fits into the car of your package that you present to your clients or you use within your workplace. So of necessity, given the length of this talk, it's going to have to be very brief. I'm going to be picking up just small bits and pieces that I think are critical for you to understand, but there's a lot more detail about motivation in, well, our website, motivationalmaps.com, and in the 5 books that were published by Routledge, which I will reference at the end of my talk to you. So if we kick off with this, there are 4 things I said I'd actually do today. And while we're looking at those 4 things and you're reading them, let me just say this. Why is motivation important? Motivation is important because the synonym for motivation, I think, the best synonym, drive's a good synonym, action's a good synonym, but the real synonym, I think, that sums it up is the word energy. Motivation is about energy, and energy moves us. And without energy, we become listless, we become lifeless, we become actually very, very ineffective. And as we're going to see when we get to it, motivation is a core component of something that all companies and all organizations want, and which, when we're in our right mind, we want ourselves. And that is namely performance. Everybody who has high self-esteem, or even any self-esteem, actually needs and wants to perform. And part of the reason for this comes back to our childhood. You know, we have all our life been under the judgment of people, parents, carers, teachers, friends, who judge us by our performance. In fact, it starts off with, are we a good boy or a good girl? Or are we a bad girl or a bad boy? How are we behaving? How are we performing? And we get these series of adjustments, which actually tell us, well, I'm doing good here. I'm performing well, or I'm performing badly. And this cumulatively builds up in our life so that performance becomes a very determinative factor in terms of our self-esteem and in terms of our confidence and in terms of our success in life. Now, here's something which is slightly off the wall, but it's worth saying to you, particularly if you are an independent, self-employed person, but it's worth saying even if you're not. And it's this. I have actually been in the motivation specific business for I'm in my 19th year now. And before I actually set up this business, I was a trainer coach for 9 or 10 years, an independent trainer coach. So it was relevant then, even before I had this product. But it's this, it's that motivation is, in sales parlance, a feature. What I've discovered over 30 years of being in this business is that really, no matter what MDs and CEOs and HR people say to you about motivation, it's actually a feature. Very few people, unless they have a specific motivational profile, i.e. they have expert number 1 in their profile, very few people really want to pay money to buy motivation. It's seen as being an extra. It's like a luxury, something you add on, or something even worse than a luxury. It's something which is expected. I'm paying you a salary. I'm paying your fee. Well, of course, it's going to be motivated, isn't it? Because what we realize, of course, is that, 70% of the workforce is disengaged. So we can't expect motivation. But it's seen as a feature. So the key thing to understand at the outset of what I'm about to say, because I'm going to probe quite deeply into what motivation is, beyond what its energy, what we need to understand is what is the benefit that comes from the feature of motivation. So what is the thing that we actually can sell to HR, we can sell to MDs and CEOs? What is it that they really want underneath all these other things like emotional intelligence, NLP, motivation? Who wants these things? They're only features. What people want, the benefit, is performance. And we want to perform, if we've got any sense at all. And what is the benefit of performance? The benefit of performance is productivity. Productivity comes about when you actually perform and your colleagues and your teams perform at a high level. And what is the benefit of productivity? So we're going up a chain here. The benefit of productivity is profitability, which is what, or if you're in the charity sector, for example, it would be value add-on. It would be added value. So profitability or value add are the benefits of productivity, assuming, and there is a big assumption here, which I have to tell you, I will tell you about more assuming, of course, that the strategy of the organization is correct. because clearly you could be highly motivated, you could be performing at a very high level, you could be immensely productive, your team could be immensely productive, but if the strategy for the company or the organization is wrong, then sadly, you hit a brick wall. So what we're talking about then is that motivation is a feature, it's about energy, and it leads to performance. And one other thing before I take a little side bar again, and that is this, is that when we talk about energy and we talk about motivation, the thing is, the problem with it to date has been there has been no proper language to describe it. Now, when I say no proper language, there has been a language, and the typical language that is used to describe motivation derives from Freud, namely the pleasure-pain principle. And what this is called in NLP terms is away and towards motivation. So we move away from pain, but we move towards pleasure. And this simple binary thing has been, and it's true, of course, I'm not disputing its validity, but it's actually very simplistic because it's just binary. There are just two things. So we have a problem with motivation that actually, if there's no language to properly describe it, all we're constantly talking about is, oh, people need to be motivated. But what does this actually mean? So there does need to be a language to describe motivation. And alongside the language, when you're in primary school, you have to do reading, writing, and arithmetic. There's no metric either. And what isn't measured metrically in numbers tends not to be taken seriously. So even if we had a language, if we don't have a metric, then we have a problem. Now, it will come as no surprise to you to know or to learn at this point that motivational maps, the product I have invented, solves both problems. It provides a metric and it provides a language. And we're going to share a little bit about both of those things with you in a moment. So before we do that, though, let's go to our little sidebar. And the sidebar is this. You know, if you were to talk to me about what is my biggest competition in this field of a diagnostic tool, it's clearly personality and psychometric testing. This clearly is what people know. Myers-Briggs, everyone's heard of Myers-Briggs. You've heard of DISC, you've heard of Insights, you've heard of strength inventories and finders. You've heard of, there's dozens of these things out there and companies use them. And here's the thing is, I like them. Most of them are quite valuable, but, and this is the important thing to understand, they are doing something quite different from what I am talking about. So here's a little kind of concept or jingle for you that you might find interesting, and why I'm saying that motivational maps is far more important than psychometrics or personality tests. Why? Because nobody goes to work on a Monday morning because of their personality or their psychometric test. Nobody goes to work because of their personality. You go to work because of your motivators. That is, or because you have to, or because you have to. But actually, that's a very bad state to be in, because you have to go to work, you know, because you can't afford not to. That's a very bad state to be in. So we go to work because of our motivators. So in one fell moment, I'm suggesting to you, this is really, motivational maps are really relevant at getting to the root cause of people at work. Now, what are the differences then between personality and motivation? Well, I've listed three up there. So let's just go through those before I add something else. Personalities deal with traits and types, which are fixed and stable. I know a company once who, you know, they were actually a government agency, but basically one of their senior staff said to me, "Oh, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of our days out. We have every year we have this kind of training day." I said, what are you sick of? He said, "Oh, we keep doing," I won't mention the name, but we keep doing this personality test. I said, "Well, what's the problem?" He said, "Well, I've done it for 5 years running. I keep getting the same result." because the personality doesn't change. It's fixed and stable. unless there are extreme circumstances. That's the whole point of a personality, that it's actually, this is you, so it doesn't change you on fundamental level. So it's useful once, but once you know it, you know it. Whereas maps deal with, and I should explain why this and how this works in a moment. They deal with states which are changing and dynamic. In fact, in a healthy person, your personality profile will probably change every 18 months to 2 years. So, and in fact, if you are in a rapid changing environment, either at home or at work, it will change more frequently than that. We have companies where they map the whole staff every 3 months. Every 3 months, and they can spot so much that's happening internally with their staff as a result of this. I'll say more about that later on. Secondly, personality tests, psychometrics, give a snapshot of who you are. Maps give a video of where your energy is flowing. Where your energy is flowing. Don't you just love that? Where is your energy flowing, baby? Where is it flowing? Where is it going to go? Where is it going to go? If we know what the profile is, then we know where that energy is seeking to go. We know where the water is rushing. So we can actually deepen the channels to make it more powerful rather than blocking it with things that you don't like. And thirdly, it need only be done once because you are you and you are invariable. It needs to be done frequently, which I've already mentioned. So your energy, you should see it as being like your health. It needs monitoring and boosting. And this is the thing about the maps. It describes motivation. It measures motivation. It monitors motivation, and it maximizes motivation. Now, for those of you of a technical nature who like technical stuff, and if you want more technical stuff, you'll find it in my books. But motivational maps is a self-perception inventory. That's its technical term to describe what it is. What is a self-perception inventory? It's an ipsative test. What is an ipsative test? An ipsative test is a test which measures you against what? Now, I won't tell you what that something is, because that's exactly what psychometrics and personality tests are not. Psychometrics and personality tests are either normative, which means you are being measured against another section of the population. It's normative. What's the norm? How do you measure against the norm of other people? Or it's actually criterion-based, which means they measure you against a standard. So the psychometrics and personality tests are normative or criterion-led, whereas motivational maps is a self-perception inventory, which is ipsative, which measures you against what's left. If I'm not measuring you against other people, if I'm not measuring you against a standard, what else could I be measuring you against? Answer, it measures you against yourself, which is why it's so startlingly accurate. It's not something artificial. It's measuring you against some other standard that you may or not subscribe to, other people that you may or may not care about. It actually measures you against your own self-perception. The power in that, I could spend another hour talking about. I won't, but I think you get the gist of what I'm trying to say. It's very, very, very powerful indeed. Now, actually, I could pause at that point, because actually that's a lot of quite detailed information, and somebody might want to ask me a question on it before we move on to the next slide. But does that make sense to everybody? Is that kind of, well, is it interesting? Are you with me on this, or have you fallen asleep already? I don't want you to fall asleep. I want you to be with me here. I want to feel your hearts beating, thinking, I've got to get more motivation. I've just got to get more motivation. Any questions?
Nothing in the chat, no hands raised. So I think you're good
Okay.
for now.
Right. So, okay. So here we come into something which is really very profound. If we've got coaches here, by the way, you will find this, I think, really fascinating. Question is, well, you're talking about motivation. You're talking about being energy. You haven't yet defined what you mean by these motivations, which we're coming to in the next slide. But where does motivation itself come from? And it comes from three sources within our psyche. And you can see what they are there. And they are three very interesting sources. The first of these sources is it comes actually from our personality, which is why I like personality tests. By the way, if you want my personal opinion on what the greatest of all the personality tests are, which one is superior to all of them, bar none, which one is 5 times better than the second best, I'll tell you now, it's the Enneagram. The Enneagram, the 9-point personality test is just absolute. And I use the Enneagram partly in constructing the maps. There are 9 types of motivators. There are 9 personalities in the Enneagram. Enneagram is from the Greek, meaning 9 points. It is an ancient tool. I wrote 10 articles for New York's The Epoch Times on its correlation with Homer's Odyssey. The journey of Odysseus actually touches on 9 points, which are all representative of the 9 personality types. The Lotus Eaters, for example, are point number 9. What do the Lotus Eaters do? They take drugs and they're a permanently stupid state. There are people who want to kind of blank out and narcotize their life. Point number 9. Point number 8, he runs into the Cyclops, one-eyed giants who are brute strength, very aggressive. That's the point 8, and so on and so forth. So it's a fascinating tool, and it goes back to the deep depths of myth and history. It's old. It's very old. It's not like the modern inventions, very superficial compared to the Enneagram. Anyway, to come on to this, so the personality. Now, here's the thing about personality, because I've already told you this. It tends to be invariant unless there is massive stress, tends to be invariant, and it actually arises from our past and from our upbringing. So its tense is in the past. It's relatively fixed. There's not a lot we can do about it. And here's the thing. It actually comprises somewhere between 20 to 30% of our motivational profile. And it's why so many psychometrics and I mean, I've seen various motivational tools claiming to be motivational diagnostics. Every one I've looked at, and I won't mention them by name because it would be wrong. Actually, they're not motivational diagnostics. They're psychometrics dressed up as motivational tools. Now, there's an element of truth in a psychometric tool dressed up as a motivational tool, because there's a kind of 30% of it. People who don't develop at all, who just remain the same, and there are people like that, we've all met them, actually, their motivational profile gets closer and closer to their personality profile all the time because there's no development going on. Now, the really interesting bit comes to point number 2 on this triangle. Point number 2 is the self-concept. Now, the self-concept is how we understand ourselves in the present. So the personality is past, but the self-concept is present. It must be variable. It's about the beliefs we have about ourselves. And the thing about that, they must change. The beliefs you have about yourself are not the same beliefs you had when you were 14 years old or 6 years old. And if you're as old as me, and I'm very old, as Sathpal made very clear from those dates and stuff he gave, I'm a very old person. I am not the same person, not the same beliefs about myself I had when I was 21. Now, I haven't got time to go into this in detail now, but interestingly, if you're a coach, you might want to research this. The self-concept itself breaks down into 3 subcomponents. The self-esteem, how I feel about myself, the self-image, how I see myself, and the ideal self, the person I want to be. And can you see past, present, and future running through that as well? The self-esteem, how I feel, has a past tense to it. How I see myself now, present tense. The ideal self I'm going to be, my state of becoming, is actually the future. And by the way, this is one of the reasons why, and if you're a coach, I strongly recommend you investigate with your clients, who are their role models? Our role models affect our ideal self. Who are we going to become? If we have trite, trivial, stupid role models, then in fact, we are going to become trite, stupid people. If we have really exciting, high value, highly moral, highly courageous, highly, industrious people as our role model. And by the way, these can be real people, which is the best of all, but they can also be fictional. Sathpal, before we started this, talked about, did I like Star Wars? Of course I do. I mean, Darth Vader was a role model for my youngest son. I mean, amazing. When he was very young, he loved Darth Vader. He got those lightsabers. Now he's waging a war on behalf of goodness. Gandalf is a role model to us all. We want to be the wizard who does the magic, who takes on the Dark Lord and brings Darth Vader down. Oh, the role models. Who are your role models? It's an absolutely critical question. So the self-concept is changing. It's changing. And it's going to change your motivators. Sometimes it can happen in a day. If you suddenly had a terrible loss in your life, a partner died, for example, or you entered, I don't do the lottery myself, but you entered the lottery. I don't believe in gambling myself. If you entered the lottery and you suddenly won 60 million pounds, I heard on an advertisement today, the 62 million pound jackpot for the European lottery. If you won 62 million pounds, it might change your motivational profile instantly, because your self-concept could change instantly. But by and large, 18 months, 2 years, sometimes even 3 years, it's a process. And the third and final thing that has an impact on our motivators is our expectations. What are our expectations? They are, of course, this is future, as the very word expectation indicates. It's a future orientated, tense orientated thing. They are our beliefs about future outcomes. So here is the most obvious example to give you. If I believed that coming to give a talk for Work Scotland was a complete waste of time, and I was going to meet a whole bunch of bozos if I turned up, how motivated would I be to turn up? If I believe turning up to work is just a waste of time, I'm just treading water, there's nothing, nobody listens to me, I'm not taken into account, the work's not important. If I believe that, that's my expectation. If I believe going on this date is a complete waste of time, men are like this or women are like that, they're all the same, I don't like this. If you believe that, then guess what happens? Things start conforming. Reality starts conforming to the beliefs. The beliefs start forming the future. So this is one of the most powerful things in coaching, actually, which is to actually investigate people's expectations of the future. It's an incredible thing. And it will affect and provide energy for your motivators. So we have one fixed point of about 25 to 30%, 20, 25, 30%, one fixed point, and then 70% of your motivators come about through what you believe about yourself now and what you believe about future outcomes. And both of those two things are changeable, and you can change them yourself. And your managers can change them for you. And we'll talk about how they do that in a minute without it being manipulative, with it being ethical and proper and actually good for you. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm already so excited by this talk. How are you feeling? Is this something you can get your teeth into? Because, well, let's get to the next bit, shall we? Let's get to the next bit, and then you can ask me a question. Because the next bit is when, let me give you some of the language. Now, we have in motivational maps worked out, this is partly to do with Maslow, it's partly to do with the Enneagram, and it's also partly to do with the research of a top American professor, he's dead now, but called Edgar Schein, who developed a product called Career Drivers. A lot more information about all of this stuff is in book 1, Mapping Motivation. Essentially, everybody has 9 motivators in their psyche. We have all of them. Nobody has just 1 or 2 of them. We've got all of them. And what your motivational profile is not one motivator. It's usually the top 3. We've done over 100,000 motivational maps now, well over 100,000. I don't know the exact number, well over 100,000 maps. And the vast, vast majority of people have 3 motives, but occasionally you meet somebody who has really only 2, and sometimes you meet somebody who has 4, even 5. And all that's to do with is the scoring, which we'll come on to a bit later on with this. So actually, your motivational profile is your top 3 motivators. And these are what give you traction. These are the things that excite you. And the more that you personally feed those 3 top motivators, and the more that your loved ones feed those motivators for you, and the more that your work colleagues and managers and bosses feed those 3 motivators, the happier you're going to be. And the more motivated you're going to be. And the less they do that, the worse it becomes for you. Now, let's go through the 9 motivators one by one. And at the end of it all, you might notice, I'm going to invite you to see, well, what might be, if it's the top 3 motivators that count, what might be a problem in any individual's given psyche, given it? You'll notice there are 3 colors in this. There are 3 colors. There are, because the 9 are classified into 3 groups of 3, as is the Enneagram, by the way. There's relationship motivators, which in a sense corresponds with the Enneagram with the heart. Relationship is heart. There's the achievement motivators, which in the Enneagram corresponds to the head, the thinking. And there's the growth motivators, which correspond with the body, the gut instinct. So starting at the bottom of Maslow, we start with the bottom of the Maslow hierarchy, although in Maslow, there's a layer beneath this, because here we're dealing with wants. A layer beneath in Maslow would be the need to breathe oxygen, to drink water, to eat food. They are survival. Maslow, we don't deal with survival level. I actually once had, did pro bono work for the Prince's Trust as a mentor in one of Her Majesty's prisons to help people who are coming out of prison to readjust to civilian life. And I found dealing with prisoners, whenever they did a map, the map was correct, but irrelevant. Because virtually everybody that came out of prison had such low self-esteem, they filled it in, they understood the English words, but they didn't act in accordance with their own profile because they were always in a state of need. They were always trying to game the system. It was a terrible thing to realize because it made it much more difficult to help them. But anyway, to come back to these 9 motivators, so that the bottom one is the defender. Oh, by the way, they're all equal. They're all of equal value. They're just how people are. And you can have them at the top and you can go back to the bottom and vice versa in a blink of an eye, given certain circumstances, as I've tried to indicate before. So the bottom one we call the defender. Now, the defender, what does the defender want? They want security. They want predictability. They want stability. So, question for you, do you think they like change? I can see somebody going, exactly right. So somebody who wants security, predictability, and stability doesn't like change. So when you talk about change management, and you talk about the kind of world we're in at the moment where change seems to be every 5 seconds things are changing, you know, you've got a bunch of people and you can't necessarily know who they are just by your current recruitment processes. You actually might have defender as their number 1 motivator. And actual fact, whatever they say to the contrary, deep down, because this is revealing their psyche, they don't like change, they don't want change, and they're going to try and sabotage it, although they may not say that. However, that sounds negative. The good side of these people is they are totally thorough and they're going to make sure things work because they don't like shortcuts. They want to make sure things are really good. The kind of person that, in terms of career, that could be a defender would be an accountant or an engineer. These kind of people, it's got to be right. Got to be right. Now, up from the defender, we have the friend. The friend seeks belonging, friendship, relationships. Now, again, this is, oh, by the way, why is the defender relationship motivator? Because security is the fundamental thing we get from our parents. We can't, as a one-day-old baby, actually save ourselves. We have to rely on an adult to do it. And it's a kind of ingrained sense of security that comes from that relationship. Friend is obviously a belonging motivator. And the thing about these people is they're great team players. These people like teams. They come to work to be in teams. They don't want to be working at home. They don't want to be, oh, I can work at home. Great. No, actually, a friend motivator wants to be in the office or wants to be with the group. They want to go for pizzas on Friday because they value that. They want to belong. It gives them a great sense of, it's a kind of accomplishment for them. The next up is the star. The star seeks recognition, respect, social esteem. This person can be, could be great in PR, could be great as a public speaker, actually can be a bit of a pain in a team because unlike the friend who wants to belong to the team, the star wants to stand out in the team. If you add too many stars, if there's one person who stands out and the rest are friends, that's great. They can love it. They can love this star. He's a bit different. If you've got a team of 6 people and 3 of them are stars, do you know what? There's only so much air band. There's so much space for, giving people recognition. Can become very competitive. Now we move for, but of course the star is a relationship motivator because they have to get from other people this relationship of appreciation. Now we move to achievement motivators, and they turn to red now. So actually the next 3 motivators are really what most businesses in the UK are built on overtly, particularly when you come to recruitment practices. So the first of these is the director, who wants power, influence, control of people and or control of resources. Now, I have met MDs of companies where the director is the lowest motivator. And clearly that is a flag sign. It's a flag up sign because, of course, actually they don't really want to direct. They're a director by title. They may be a director by skill. I'll tell you a secret. Actually, director is my lowest motivator. My top motivators have changed since I developed the product over an 18-year period, but my lowest motivator has always remained the same. It's director. And I once was a senior manager for 7 years, and I was very good at it. I had the skill set, but I always felt, you know what? People coming to me with their problems is really a pain in the neck. I really don't want to be doing this. Actually, I knew I didn't want to be a manager, even when I was a good manager. And of course, if you carry on doing something you don't really want to do, you start what they call running on empty. You start running on empty. It leads to burnout. The second one up, exactly in the middle of the 9, the 5th one, it's 4 up and 4 down from the top to the bottom, is the one that everyone thinks everybody wants. They go to work for money. We call it the builder. They seek money, material satisfaction, and an above average standard of living. And the thing about the builder motivator that's really important to get is this is the most competitive of all the motivators. If you want a competitor in your team, that's why so many salespeople have got builder in their profile. It's a great motivator, but of course not when you don't. So in fact, you can tell already, can't you? A builder and a friend, the competitor with somebody who wants to belong, that might be a tricky situation. A lot of personality conflicts are not personality conflicts, they're motivational conflicts because they're energies which are clashing. But you can clearly see, director, we need managers, we need charge hands, we need foremen, we need directors, we need leaders. You can see that this is something that's very relevant to those kind of posts. I once did a training session in Dorset, which is where I'm based, and for MDs. I had about 30 MDs, and they did a map before they came on the training session. It was funded by one of the government techs or business links. And it was interesting. Virtually all the MDs, these are all MDs of small businesses, businesses employing 50 people, 100 people, that kind of thing. They all had director in their top 3, more or less. I think it was just one exception, I think it was. So this is a very, very common motivator in business. The expert, of course, is probably even more common. Why? They want knowledge, mastery, specialization. I would imagine that actually 2/3 of the people in on this call have got that in their top 3, and probably 1/3 of them have got it as their number 1. All those IT geeks, accountants, actually a typical double act for accountants is defender, security, and expert numbers. You know, learning expertise, being really good at what you do, it driving you. And here's the flip side of it. I was in a company once, a corporation, a big company, and the head of learning and development had booked me, and she'd done a map beforehand. An expert was her lowest motivator. And I said, so you're responsible, are you, for all the training and learning that's going on in this organization? And she said, yeah, yeah. So I said, do you feel it's burning you out? She said, what do you mean? I said, well, you don't want it yourself, do you? And she said, oh, well, first she said, like, how do you know that? I said, well, I've got your motivational map. You're experts, you love it. I said, the problem you've got, I said, is going to have, you're relatively new in this job. I said, 5 years down the line, 7 years down the line, actually the staff will begin to realize that training applies to everybody except you. They will notice you don't walk the talk. There will be an inconsistency in your approach. So expert. So these are the classic ones now in our businesses. We have director, we have the builder, we have the expert. This is core business stuff. And then we move to the blue. We move to the blue where we go on to what are called the growth motivators. Another word for growth here might be self-development motivators, where, who all so by the way, you may have noticed the three things also correlate to the green: past, relationship stuff, achievement corresponds to the present, stuff we do now to get things done. And now the blue corresponds to the future, where things actually are going to be, which don't yet exist. So the creator, for example, seeks innovation, identification with the new, expressing creative potential. So to innovate is to create something that doesn't exist now. As a whole bunch of people who want to innovate. And it was Peter Drucker, the great business guru who lived well into his 90s, who once said, only two things make money for a business: marketing and innovation. Everything else is a cost. So I could tell you stories about companies. I've been into literally, well, you could imagine, over 30 years, I've been into hundreds of companies. I've never counted the number. I daren't say 1,000 because that sounds too many, but 30 years, I don't know. But I've been into hundreds of companies. And actually, this whole issue of the creator in companies is fascinating, the stories you can tell. Companies, high-tech companies with loads of experts in it, actually, but very few creators. In fact, one I'm thinking of with nearly 100 staff, two creators in their top three, and all these experts and all these directors. And I knew the company was going to fail. It was high-tech, but where was the innovation happening? It just became out of date. And I warned them about it. Do you know what, though? I warned them. And here's the thing about this. They ignored it. And do you know why they ignored it? They laughed. They thought, oh, yeah, thanks, James. That's interesting. But, they laughed because I wasn't a strategic consultant. James was a people person, you see. So James is a people person. So actually reading the runes, reading the sort of mystical stuff about what you've got these people, and I actually mapped all of them. And now I can tell you that coming down the line, there's going to be a creative innovation problem for you. And lo and behold, 3 years later, there was. In fact, what began to sink them was the financial crisis, which they weren't prepared for. They just about survived it, but they just never got into getting creators in their company who could innovate for them. Tragic. Anyway, the spirit. Now, here's one of my favorites.
Just before you move on to the final group of them, we did have a question which I thought might be good for you to pick up now, given you walking through the different personality types. So the question from Logan, and he's asking, can you say a little bit more about what happens when the builder and the friend work together? So I'm sure he's got motivation for asking.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Now, you have to keep in mind what I said to you at the very beginning. The thing is, it's not one motivator, it's three. So when we come to team maps, as we're going to see with Sathpal and Donald, we'll see actually they have a huge overlap as it happens, but they also have one profound difference in their thing. It's not this particular one of friend and builder, but they have a difference, which is quite a profound difference. So we'll talk about that when we get to it all. So it's not just the one motivator. What you've got to take on board is the three motivators, because one motivator shared, and let me give you the most typical example of this, actually can override the difference with the, say, builder and friend. So for example, when we'd completed 30,000 maps, we did a kind of data crunch on what was the most common motivator based on 30,000 people. And the most common motivator, 40%, had searcher, which is to make a difference. And we find with coaches and consultants, so the kind of people who actually have turned up for this will have almost certainly searcher as well in their top three. Now, actually, if you're trying to make a difference with the searcher, which we haven't come on to yet, actually, you can put aside perhaps the fact that this person is very competitive because we are on the same team. You can put aside this person wants to go for pizzas on a Friday, and I don't really want to go for pizzas because I've got more goals to achieve, because we're on the same team and we have a motivator in common. So having a motivator in common can be a very, very big binding factor that offsets the tension. But as it's such a good question, let me answer the question I asked you at the very start of this, because of course we're talking about this in terms of teams. Some of you may have noticed that, in fact, since you have three motivators, internal conflicts can occur. In other words, somebody could have builder and friend in their top three and have an internal conflict between their need to compete with other people and their need to want to belong. And as I'm on the creator now, I once had a finance director of an American company I was coaching for 6 months, and he had a 0-point difference between his creator motivator at the top and his defender motivator as his top two. And there's a 0-point difference. Now, our algorithm can actually make a distinction even when the scores are equal. I won't explain how it does that, but there is still an order of priority, even if the scores are equal. We have a 8-stage algorithm which works out which one you would actually prefer if your life depended on it. But the thing about it being so closely scored is that meant this person, so the creator, so just as I said, if you think about it, does the defender want change? No. Does the creator want change? Seeks innovation, identification with the new. Absolutely. So you've got an individual who's got equally scored, I don't want change, I love change. Now, can you see, for some people, of course, don't understand it's their motivations and don't understand what to do about it and remain in a permanent state of stasis. They actually become very indecisive. They become procrastinators. This guy whom I was coaching said to me, I sometimes I'm not sure what to do. So what I did in coaching him is I actually went through the different levels at which he worked. So at the one level, he was working strategically. So as a result of the process, to get him to answer it, but we ended up in a situation where he realized he needed to be creative on the strategic front, but where his work was operational, he needed defender. He needed to actually get security and get systems in place. So he actually got a resolution by actually spinning out the areas of his work where each would be applicable, and both could therefore be satisfied, rather than there being this constant feeling of being torn in two different directions. So I hope that answers your question. If it hasn't, ask another question and Sathpal can interrupt me again. It's great. And by the way, it's not a personality, Sathpal. I've tried to make that very clear to you. It's a motivational tool. Okay, now listen to me, man. Listen. Okay, so the spirit motivator is these, just as the friend is all lovey-dovey and wants to be part of it all, the spirit is the maverick. This is the difficult person. This is the lone wolf. This is the lone ranger. This is the person, the man or woman who wants freedom, independence, and make their own decision. This is the person that the golden rule of management of these people, and for example, a sales team is a classic case in point. You get loads of these mavericks in sales teams where you actually tell them what the objective is and then step back and stop trying to tell them how to do it unless they ask you. This is absolutely critical for the spirit motivator. When I took my own test in 2006, when it first started, spirit was my number 1 motivator. It's now my number 4 motivator. So I've changed. I'm not quite as bolshy as I used to be. I'm not quite as difficult as I used to be. In fact, I'm kind. I'm loving. I'm gentle. I'm very compliant. I'm okay now. I've recovered from my own motivational map. You please for me, Sathpal. Good. Okay, so finally, the searcher. So when we come to the searcher is the apex of the Maslow hierarchy and seeks meaning, making a difference, providing worthwhile things. And essentially, it's the motivator where we're on a mission. So the spirit is the motivator where we're on a vision, but the searcher is the motivator where we're on a mission. Purpose is at the very core of being a searcher. Purpose, mission, making a difference. Loads of people that run charities have got searcher, big spike to searchers. They must make a difference. It's a save the world thing, really. Let's save the world. We're searchers. So it's a kind of form of self-realization and growth. So there are 9 motivators in 3 groups of 3. Any one person typically has 3 in their top, and those 3 could be 3 of one type, 1 of each, 2 of one, 1 of the other, and 1 of 2. So when you think about 9 motivators, how many combinations are there? There's 9 times 8 times 7 times 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. Somebody can tell me that is, but there's literally millions because of the score ranges. The number of possible combinations when you start, even if you just had 3 levels of score ranges, because we'll come on to scoring a bit later on, but actually it provides us with actually millions of combinations. So if you think about most personality psychometric tests, there are 16 types. Sometimes you meet an advanced one where there are 72 types, but with motivational maps, there are millions of combinations. It's much more individual and individualistic than anything a personality test could tell you about yourself. But actually, in telling you, I have to tell you as well, it will change, which is why I am very hot on telling mappers, and occasionally mappers who are trained say to me, oh, I'm a searcher. No, you're not a searcher. You're currently your number 1 motivator is searcher, but that might change. You're not any of these things. This does not stereotype you. If we start saying I'm a searcher, I'm a defender, it's a stereotype. No, we're not stereotyping anybody. It changes. So with that in mind, and if I could get my little, oh, there it is, get my little arrow to work. Here we come now. Oh, we come to actually, what can I say? But the benefit, we've been dealing with features really, as interesting as they are, but what is performance? If motivation is the feature and we want performance, what constitutes performance? And there are 3 major ingredients. By the way, you may have noticed that the number 3 and the number 9 keeps occurring in this work. It's a magic number. In all religions of the world, 3. Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, the 3 major Olympian gods. Shiva, the rest of it, the 3 Indian gods, the 3. It's a magic number. It's mystical. There are 3 things that make up performance. And I liken this to a car. So the analogy is with a car. You have a lovely car, or you don't have a lovely car, but you have a car, and you want to go to Edinburgh. Well, if you're in Bournemouth, as I am, I'm going to go north. And how am I going to get there? I'm going to get from Bournemouth to Edinburgh with the steering wheel. The steering wheel is going to take me in the right direction. Now, the word direction is very important for performance because if we go in the wrong direction, everything else is invalid. But direction, we could use words like strategy. We could use words like goals, objectives, targets. We could cascade it down. We want to go in a direction, and are we going in the right direction to get to Edinburgh? And that little thing called the steering wheel, the business plan, is what is actually going in a certain direction. Then we need to have a bunch of people in the car or in the bus who have got the skills, and skills here means skills and knowledge. You might want to use other words for it, competencies, or there's a whole range of words, but actually I love the word skills because I can understand what it means. Skills and knowledge. Have we got the skills and knowledge? And that's the chassis. It's the BMW. It's the Merc. It's been fine-tuned. It's beautifully upholstered. Everything about those skill sets is really wonderful. We're in the car. We've got the steering wheel. But, and here's the thing, it's the fuel the energy that makes the car go. We have to have motivation to get the car moving at all. Without motivation, in fact, the whole thing is going to go absolutely nowhere. And it's really quite remarkable when you think about it, just how many people and how many businesses over the decades since World War II and before just think they can have skill sets, have a strategy, but not worry about the people, not worry about their motivation. We could call it other things. We do have other ways of looking at it, engagement and all those kind of words as well. But, you know, I like the word motivation. Motivation fuels engagement. I've got a book called Mapping Motivation for Engagement, which shows you what the link is between motivation and engagement. It's too much to go into here, but you get the drift. So those three things, anybody with a team that they manage or thinking about their own personal career, what's the direction you are going in? Do you know where you're going to be in 5 to 10 years' time? What skill sets do you have? What skill sets and knowledge do you need? What training do you need to have? What coach do you need to acquire? But critically, have you done a motivational map? And by the way, I've offered a free motivational map to anyone who's on this course, but have you done a motivational map to actually work out what your motivators currently are and how you're feeding them? I mean, I think that's a pretty bit of valuable advice, don't you? I think it's pretty valuable advice. And that leads on to the map itself. And I think what I need to say about this, the map is 15 pages long. It takes you 12 minutes to do online. It's 15 pages long for the individual map. It's 22 pages long for the team map. The organizational map is 44 pages long, as all these numbers are compounded and a whole series of change management tools are built into the report. I'm not showing the whole report. It will just take too long to do all this, but you can go online, you can see a lot more stuff. But can you see, these are pretty comprehensive things. So from the individual map, I've just taken one slide, one bar chart. There'll be a bit more coming later on, but to show you just how this works. So here is a profile on page 6 of the 15 pages of an individual showing their 9 motivators in rank order in a bar chart. You will see that the bar chart goes up to 35, but in fact, in this instance, but the total maximum score is out of 40, the minimum score is 0. And so there's a range of scores between that. Some people are closely scored, so that, for example, their top score might be 23 and their bottom score is 18. So all 9 motivators come within that very narrow range. If you're coaching such a person, then the key question to actually help them with is to get clarity on what they want, because clearly with 9 motivators in a narrow range, they almost certainly won't know what they want. 2 massive ranges where somebody has 38 at one end, 3 at the other, and a range of 35 points, where they are, we call it above 30, we call a motivator a spike. Below 10, you can see the dotted line there, we call it an inverse spike. Inverse spikes effectively are motivational aversions. So when you have, as I did once with an accountancy practice, somebody in the room had a director motivator scored 1 out of 40, I was able to, in front of the group, I had permission to do this, by the way, of course, to say, you don't wish to be a manager, do you? I'm making up her name. Tracy. You don't want to be a manager, do you, Tracy? No, I don't, she said. And you don't like management either, do you? No, she said. Yeah, the whole room burst into laughter because everyone knew she was a very, very bolshy person. But, you know, to have a director as 1 out of 40 is an inverse spike. It's an aversion to that motivator. But to have 37 out of 40, it's not just a motivator, it's a craving. It's not just a want, it's a real passion. There are combinations of numbers, by the way, where we know the result is false. I won't go into that now, but we have a way from looking at the numbers to know when people give false motivational profiles. And it's very rare. What's the point in doing it? But some people want to do it. So when you look at this now, what you've got is a reason. This is probably some coach that has done this for me. And, you know, 30, their top motivator, it's blue. And we can see that it's creator. So this person wants to innovate. We can see that star is second. They want a bit of recognition. but quite a way behind the top motivator. And then we get more closely packed motivators. At number 3, we have searcher. So they want to make a difference. Above 20 is the point where it's got traction. Below 20, the traction's falling away. Above 20. So this person has effectively got really 4 motivators. So they've got a 4th one there with spirit. So they've got 3 blue motivators and 1 green. So there's a slight internal conflict. There is a star motivator that doesn't really like change, and there are 3 motivators that do, but the dominant motivator is the creator that definitely does like change and definitely does want to actually make things happen and be involved with new things. And by the way, there's a slight overlap with the star and the creator anyway, because I don't really remember this. I've got any IT programmers here, but I don't know whether it still happens. But in the old days, in the 90s and early noughties, when we had programs from Word and other kind of providers, there used to be a thing you could click on where the names of the people who actually wrote the programming occurred. Creators like to have their name on the book of poems, like to have their name in the plans they've drawn up. They like to be recognized for their creativity. They're not stars and they want to be stars. They just want to be recognized for their creative component. So there's an overlap a little bit with the star there. And at the bottom end of this, we have friend. Doesn't mean they're unfriendly. They might have advanced social skills, but they don't go to work for social chit chat, to talk about their kids, to talk about what they're doing at the weekend. They don't do it for that reason. And defender. So that's also low. So that reinforces, it's like a polarity reinforcement of they are more. So having said that star kind of puts a bit of a break on it, no, defender near the bottom with friend, the green, both at the bottom. No, this person is probably a high risk taker. So, depending on what they do, every map is contextual. Depending on what their role is, depending on the role, will depend upon what questions we might ask them or what we might want to focus on. So if, for example, they were an IT programmer, but their expert's quite low, I'd be a little bit worried. I'd be thinking, well, how much training have they had done? Are they at the cutting edge? Do I need this person at the cutting edge of IT programming or medicine for that matter? Something where a lot depends on it. So does that give you a flavor of, just looking at that one? That's just one bit of a 15-page report. So if we move on from that, you could say, so where does this all go? Well, every report contains what we call reward strategies. So for your top motivator, we give you 5 ideas that you can use for yourself or your manager can use for you to actually motivate you. We give you 3 ideas for your second motivator and 3 ideas for your third motivator. So in total, you end up with 11 ideas that will motivate you. So actually, and we have, when we train people, a whole booklet of reward strategy ideas for each of the 9 motivators. Here are things to do. And you have to kind of feel, there's no, you just apply this. It's like, given this person in this situation, would this work for this person? And if you're coaching them, you can find out, do they want that? So, for example, a director wants more responsibility. A spirit wants less, wants more freedom. So, for a spirit, for example, we have a tool called the, be, do, have tool. You may have come across this, where we start asking, what can we do less of, more of? What can we less of, more of? And actually in various gradations, so we can actually get the spirit to strip away extraneous stuff to free up their time, which is what they're like. But this works in a much simpler way. So this is a summary, like hot buttons for the motivators, a hot button for the self and a hot button for the manager. So if we take the searcher who wants to make a difference, who loves meaning, one of the key ways we establish that you are making a difference is praise and regular feedback. Now that's nowhere near, I mean, everyone likes praise and regular feedback, but it's nowhere near as important for a spirit who's a maverick. They need less, pat on the back, it's not so important. But for the searcher, when you say, I liked it when you did this because this actually, and then you spell out what the difference was and you rehearse that back to them, that is very motivating for a searcher. And for a searcher too, asking for quality feedback is something that is good for them to do, which motivates them. The spirit, opportunities for the manager, give them more autonomy, empower them. Opportunities for yourself, if you are a spirit yourself, renew your vision. Go back to your vision and ask yourself, okay, I did that a year ago, but actually in 5 years' time, all this has happened in the meantime. Where am I going to be? Spirits love vision. The creator wants innovation. Reward them when they innovate, not just reward them for anything or just give them a salary pay rise because that's what we do. Reward them for innovation specifically. And for the self, they love problem solving. They love problem solving. And so for each of these 9 types, there is one particular thing we can say, well, try that for yourself. Try that as a manager with that kind of person. Now, I'm aware I'm probably getting tight on time, so I'm going to speed up just a little bit here. And I'm just going to say, so you've got time for questions, but basically in the team map, here is just one page of a 22-page report. And whether there are 2 people in the team or whether there are 10 people in the team, by the way, I think 12 is a maximum for a real team. Beyond that, you subdivide into teams. But we have organizational maps for, if you have 1,000 people in your company, we break it. I did work with the Ordnance Survey. One of my last major clients was Ordnance Survey. I had 300 people from the Ordnance Survey. We had, something like 30 or 40 teams, and we broke down 300 people into these teams. And these were, at the end of it all, there were spreadsheets like this with the coloration, breaking down the key things we needed to see alongside all the words and the recommendations in words and the reward strategies in words. But actually, it's the numbers, it's the metrics. This was so, so powerful when we have these metrics. So when we look at this, we see a number of things. We see the red color is the top motivator, the orange is the second motivator, and the yellow is the third, and the blue is the lowest. We see that the team motivational score, that is the average between Donald's 80% and Sathpal's 89%, which I'll say more about in a minute, is 84. This is an 84% motivated team, which is in the top quadrant. I'll explain the quadrants in a minute. So this is a team that's performing in terms of its motivation in the top quadrant. So that doesn't mean job done. What it means is, well, how can we either sustain it or get them to 90% plus to get more juice from these 2? And in fact, Donald at 80 is on the threshold of falling into the second quadrant, what we call the boost. So the team's in the optimal quadrant, but Donald's on the threshold of falling into the boost zone, where actually we need to do something about him. So Donald, you're warned now, we need to do something about you. Okay, so then secondly, there's a change index score, which is calculated from an algorithm weighting the growth, the achievement, and the relationship motivators. And you can obviously realize if you've got lots of relationship motivators, you don't want change. The achievement motivators are neutral and the growth motivators are positive. So you take an algorithm that works out. So how up for change are you? There are 4 quadrants, 83%. This is a high change situation. This team, if it were a real team working in a real company, it was one team, is up for change. And then we have the RAG score. The RAG score is the relationship achievement growth scores. You'll notice it's 30% relationship, 26% achievement, and 44% growth. Now, keeping in mind there is no such thing as a bad score. It's just what it is, and it changes, right? But if I were a consultant or if I were the boss of these 2 people, that's great. So I'm certain they do plenty of training, they're on a growth path, etc. But I would be slightly worried that the achievement motivators are actually significantly lower than the other. What their appraisals tell me about their current performances, particularly in the realms of making money, directing, and of course, being an expert. That's what I'd be very interested in looking at from the point of view of these 3 people. Now, finally, before the final one, there's a finally, just quickly, I've annotated. Now, if I was doing this really, there'd be a lot more annotation than this. But, I get these things and I've done hundreds of them, thousands probably now. And I start annotating this page in particular. I love annotating this page. And so it sort of gets me to ask questions. So you can see the arrow there where I'm asking myself, 26% on the achievement motivators. Is that good? Is that bad? Not sure. I don't know what Donald's actual job is. I don't know what his role is. Does he manage people? If he manages people, director, he doesn't want to do it. So that is actually quite an interesting observation. Now, he may thoroughly love his job, I don't know. But in a coaching, managing situation with Donald, this is something I can pick up. In the case of Sathpal, the lowest motivator is money. He's not interested in making money. Now, I don't know what his job is, whether his company wants to make money or not. If he's in a company that wants to make money and profit, and he's in a sales team, I'd be thinking, is that good or bad? It's no right or wrong answer, but it's really interesting what these lowest motivators are telling you. And then how are they working together? Well, they share searcher motivator quite strongly. So there's every probability they get on very well. They both want to make a difference. And it's probably why they set up Work Scotland. It's probably a reason they want to make a difference for Scotland. And this is a method for doing it. And on this, they agree. They both respect probably each other's independence because they've both got that in their profile. So they probably, because they know what it means to be a maverick, they're both mavericks, they respect other mavericks. And they're not working in the same company. So actually, that's great. They're not grating on each other's nerves on a daily basis. But then we come to the big difference. The big difference, of course, is that Sathpal is a creator. Now, you will notice he has all three of the blue motivators, i.e. the growth motivators in his top three. So Sathpal is a change nut. He is totally up for change. And he's 89% motivated. He's getting a lot going his own way. Whereas Donald, in true Scottish fashion, doesn't want to lift his kilt up. He's a little bit more defensive. There's something there with Donald that actually wants security. Second motivator is defender. And you will see there, that's at variance with the searcher. The searcher wants change because they have to have change to make a difference, but the defender wants stability and predictability. Now, I've told you that doesn't mean, and they're not that closely scored because actually 31 and 26 is a 5-point difference. So it's clearly making a difference. It's more important than being secure. And for all I know, Donald has got both of those motivators clearly in place in what he currently does. But can you see, as an outsider who knows nothing about him or his business, as I don't, coming in, I've already got, loads of stuff before I even started coaching him or managing him. I'd have loads of information that could pinpoint things to talk about that would be really interesting to explore with him, to see what he's got to say about where do you find security in your current role, Donald? You don't have to answer that, Donald. So that is a brief overview, and to say the teams are compounded on the scores and the organization will compound them even further into a huge kind of edifice of information that is revealing. And one last thing to say about it, when you get to organizational maps, if you get that far, when you get 300 people and you have all their motivational profiles in one map, which is what you can do, as well as the individual team maps, you get one map. When you get them put in that way, a large number, the motivators begin to represent values. They come to represent core values of the company. It's fascinating how the motivational thing switches into a value thing. If everyone's a searcher or a huge majority of people have got searcher in their top three, and it's really dominant, then this is a company that wants to make a difference. It's like a mission thing for them, whether it's in their mission or not. I've actually worked with the organizational. I had a FTSE 250 company, and we worked with their whole company. Everybody in the company did it, and we measured up what the map was saying versus what their mission statement was saying, to see whether there was a discrepancy. And lo and behold, there was one discrepancy that was quite significant that we helped them with. So with that in mind, my final slide, the final slide, before I say to you, do you want to ask me any questions, is simply a plug to say, if you want a free map, james@motivationalmaps.com. And there are 5 books published by Routledge, 2 of them written solely by me, 3 of them co-written by some of my fellow mappers. Mapping motivation, mapping motivation for coaching, mapping motivation for engagement, mapping motivation for leadership, and mapping motivation for top performing teams. I actually had a contract with Routledge for 7 books. And when I reached the end of the 5th one, I said, that's it, I'm done. I just really cannot write another book on this. I am exhausted. So I gave myself a break and got the contract rewritten and did not do the final 2. But you never know. I'm old, but I might get round to it one day. But For now, 5 books is enough. So, pause, reflection. Are there any questions anybody wants to ask me? Sathpal, is there anything coming up?
There was one in the chat. I'll scroll back and dig it out. But just while I do that, well, we've only got 10 minutes left. But firstly, thank you for that. That was great, and I really enjoyed, because we obviously did got the mapping, the profiles from you a while back. But to listen to your sort of interpretations on them and your reflections on them, I thought was an eye opener, and you've got me pegged. So I loved it, because when I did it and I saw it, I thought it's pretty accurate. I'm constantly evolving and changing and looking to emerge into new things. So I think it's accurate, but I think this is something you've probably certainly seen. It's changed. So I think as a younger man, it would have been very different. So, so even when I was writing it down, I think I definitely, as a much younger person, would have been higher on the achievement motivators, and then moved more into the middle of my sort of life, probably my 30s, maybe more in the relationship motivators would have been dominant. And now I am very much into, growth, helping others grow, being purpose-led. So it's a pretty fair reflection.
It does, and I think what it reflects, and I could be wrong, so I'm just speaking because we're doing this as a kind of demonstration to people, as opposed to, this is not a coaching session. But if I was to predict, you're absolutely right in saying when you were younger, because when you were younger, you didn't have the confidence. You had to prove yourself by doing the director, expert, builder stuff in a company somewhere. But once you have the kind of proof of who you are, that confidence grows, and actual fact, then your self-concept grows, your expectations change, and you can move up to that higher level, which is, in that sense, is a higher level of Maslow. But I need to be very clear, it doesn't in any way reflect, if people at Defender and at the other level, you see, you might well reach a point where you go back to relationship motivators. You get to a certain point in your life when actually what you want is the relationships. And I don't necessarily mean in retirement, but it could be retirement. When you retire, you think, well, what I really want is my family, my friends. I want to be part of this. I want to be part of a community. And actual fact, so it's not that it's less, it's just the cycles we go through in our life.
No, that one's a dominant one for me. So I was a little bit surprised that it was not as higher, because I am very sort of relationship motivated. I do like to support and drive and build community. And I'm driven by that sense of belonging. So that was interesting. So the question, I found it, is how does this compare to the Belbin model?
Do you know what? That's a great question. Great question. Because actual fact, I didn't mention Belbin, but Belbin is the one other self-perception inventory that I know of. In other words, all the psychometrics and personalities are not self-perception, but Belbin is. So I like Belbin, and I think it's a really good thing. The thing about the Belbin, though, is it does seem to be, and I don't know why this is, because I haven't studied it sort of technically, but it does seem to give you, you have your 8 or 9 roles, and it does seem that this is your role and that's it. It seems to be that's what you're fixed at. I'm not aware of research into it changing. So if you're a chair or you're a shaper or you're a plant or any of those things, I think that's what you are. So in a sense, but I think Belbin is incredibly useful, but we need to keep in mind that the fundamental distinction. Belbin is talking about roles that people play in groups. Roles are very good, and you might be playing a role that you're motivated to play. So, for example, take the plant as a case in point. For me, if you had a plant in a team who actually also had a creator motivator, that makes total sense, because the plant is supposed to be the ideas person. So they're motivated to innovate. Perfect match in heaven. But what if some of the roles, so the chair, for example, would be the director? It makes sense. But you've got to keep in mind, it's kind of like, so that's your roles. But I think the maps are subtler. I think the fact you've got 3 motivators, and the fact they are so quite manifestly changing in a kind of change way, I think makes the maps more useful. Although I have used Belbin in my early career myself, and I like Belbin, and I have great, huge respect for it. I haven't heard anyone mention, actually, I probably haven't heard anyone mention Belbin, certainly since before COVID. It's almost like there was a moment in the noughties when Belbin was everywhere. And it was like something to sort of, I was thinking, you know, we want to be like Belbin. It's, you know, that kind of role thing. But in fact, really, Belbin seems to have disappeared. I can't, you know, on my LinkedIn feed, for example, which I regard as sacrosanct, you know, if it appears on LinkedIn, it's real. On my LinkedIn feed. By the way, if people want to link with me on LinkedIn, and you've been on this thing, do let me know. I've got an open profile on LinkedIn, so you can contact me directly on LinkedIn. If you want to link with me, I won't. I actually turn loads of people down. I'm actually getting rid of loads of people on my LinkedIn profile. I don't want too many people, but if you've been on one of my talks, etc., you're a special person. So you can link with me if you want to. And I post most days, so I've got things I want to say. So, you know, and I support other people who link with me. I've supported Work for Scotland. Alex
James,
Farr.
we've got a
Here.
few minutes. We've got a few minutes left. I'd like to squeeze in one more question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, because Bina, if I've pronounced that correct, we picked her question up earlier. So we've got Paula's one, which I think is a great question. So see what you come up with this. Come up with this. As the motivational map responses are self-reported, how do we address aspiration versus reality in terms of personality?
Well, that's a great question too. See, what we've got to keep in mind is the map can only give you one of two results. One result is it's true, and one result is it's false. Because actually, in doing the map, because it's a self-perceptive inventory, what you're actually doing is you're revealing something about yourself if you answer it truthfully. So effectively, we can usually spot the only kind of false result we could spot, even that I'm not sure, is probably if somebody tried to just simply randomize numbers. I mean, if it was completely random, that might be tricky. But of course, whenever somebody does a false result, what they're trying to do is skew the actual result, and we can spot that. So essentially what I'm saying to you is that actually we have another expression. I talked about, you know, nobody goes to work on a Monday morning because of their personality. They go to work because they're motivated. And the other expression we use in motivation is that we are making the invisible visible. So this is not about appearances, although you know, behaviors can mislead. We can all fake a behavior. We can all pretend to be nice people. We can all pretend to be this, that, and the other. We have behaviors, actually. And that's the thing about personality. It's all about behavior. We can all fake behavior. But motivational maps is going a level deeper than that. It's going to, what do you really want? And so you can either fake that, but we usually pick it up, and very few people try. Most people want to know themselves. Here's the thing that's interesting. One of the things about the 1,400 licensees is that hundreds of them are coaches. So hundreds of coaches have done maps, and I have myself trained and coached hundreds of coaches. The thing about this too is that therefore that coaches are the most self-aware, expert people who are likely to be doing a motivational map, because most of them have done psychometrics, personality tests, and are totally au fait with the whole diagnostic toolkit, right? But when you say, and we do this on our training for motivational maps, we say to them, right, okay, have you done a map? No, I haven't done a map. Okay, if you were to predict what your top 3 motivators are in rank order, could you do that for me now, having explained the 9? Most coaches can't do it. They get 1. The best get 2. They usually get the wrong order. Very few people can actually work out what their motivational profile is. And so when you go into an MD of a company that employs 200 people in, say, the steel industry or the automotive industry or something like that, where it's all very practical, it's all very, you know, here are things, and you speak to the MD and the MD says to you, well, I don't need motivation. You know, the HR's put you in. I don't need motivational maps. I know what motivates my people. you know, somebody's talking total bullshit. I have no idea what is motivating their people, but you will if you get the chance to get in. I hope that sort of gives you some sort of response to that great question.
No, that was great. I'm afraid we are up on time. We like to finish on time. You know, everybody's got other things to be getting on with.
What could that be? What could you possibly be getting on with that's more important than talking to me? What is it? I can't imagine what you could be getting on with, man.
I'm sure my wife and kids might disagree, but it's been a great session. We've thoroughly enjoyed it. We've loved having you on, and it's been a pleasure to host you this evening.
Thank you very much, everyone.
So thank you for sharing that. And as you've said, people are welcome to reach out to you directly. Yeah. There were a few questions we couldn't get to. We'll share the recording. Are your slides available? Can we share them with the group?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Why not?
If you send them around, we'll circulate them.
Great. And I will actually join your group on LinkedIn. I didn't know there was a group on LinkedIn, but I'll join your group on LinkedIn.
Please.
In course, when I you might want to send me a link to it.
We can do that.
Anyway, that'll be good. All right, then. God bless everyone.
Do that.
Bye for now. Goodbye, Donald.
Thank you. Really enjoyed that.
Thank you, James.
Excellent.
Just to wrap up, folks. We used to have a few things at the end. So we do have a couple of other sessions for those of you who are newer to the group. We've got a few things in the pipeline. We usually get our events in kind of ahead of time. So we've got a great event in April. If you're interested, so that's about Big Things Fast with Marcus Stimbleby and Jose Carrella. Marcus is well known to our group. He's spoken here before. He's previously talking about red team thinking. This time we'll be talking about how to help with breakthrough performance. So he's got a lot of great experience, and he'll be here with the co-author of his new book. So that's a fabulous session. That's in April. So look out for that. And we've also got Nia Thomas doing a session with us in May. So Nia will be talking about self-awareness and leadership. So she does a podcast. Donald and I were actually lucky enough to be asked to be guests on that, and she's actually written a book. So it'd be great to have her on, and she's going to be talking about self-awareness and leadership. It's a fantastic topic, very close to my heart. So she's our guest speaker in May. So if you're interested in that, do please sign up. Everything's in Meetup, so you'll find us there. Just sign up. We have 100 places available for these sessions on the night, and we'll have other ones in the pipeline coming up. So keep looking out for those. So thank you again for joining us this evening, and it's been really wonderful to host you and have you here. And we look forward to seeing you again. So thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be. And look after yourselves, take care, and we'll hope to see you again soon. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thanks again, James. Thank you. Great session.